Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter and Square as it happens, but Twitter's a relevant one here, said last night on Twitter that it was only a matter of time before we see the Bitcoin Lightning Network integrated with Twitter. A couple of quick things to note here. There is Jack Dorsey is an investor in Lightning Labs, which is run by Elizabeth Stark. They're obviously big leaders in this space. They do the L&D implementation. There's also the C Lightning implementation over at Blockstream. And then also, Dorsey said pretty much the same thing a couple years ago about the Cash App at Square. In 2019, Lee Quinn did a story on that at CoinDesk, and that still hasn't happened. So a matter of time. The time keeps extending out, but still, this raises possibilities at Twitter. They've been doing a lot more to empower creators, and if you can put money into that empowerment, that might be nice for people. David, I know we were chatting beforehand. This was interesting to you. What's your response to this news?
Yeah, thanks, Brady. And by the way, I like the quarantine facial hair. I'm excited by this. I think that there's going to be big problems. That's sort of a vague tweet, and there are obviously legal issues probably. But tipping online, payments online, integrating it into Twitter. Twitter has a lot of headspace in terms of adding new features, and they have accelerated that recently. So there's definitely reason to take this seriously. And Jack has proven himself a serious, committed advocate for this technology. And so I think that, the big bottom line is always adoption and usability from a, noob standpoint, right? So this would be a great on-ramp for people who maybe are not super familiar with the technology. Presumably Twitter would build it in a way that's easy to use.
And just
Jen, you want to jump
really
in?
quick. Well, one quick note there, just off of what you said, it should be worth noting that they just added a tipping feature that's available to some users, and so that would be an easy to build in there. Yeah, Jen, I know you got a thought.
Yeah, well, I think that this is just one use case that shows how transitioning from Web 2 to Web 3 is just amazing for content creators. I think there's so much opportunity for creators to not only make money off of their content, but to also prove ownership and get credit for their content as we see some of these applications roll out. So this is really interesting. Zach, I wanted to throw this down to you because it reminded me of the tweet that you were trying to sell. I believe you were trying to do that on Cent. And so when we think about that, like what do you think of this story? Do you think it's just going to be easier to, do you think people are going to be selling tweets back and forth, I guess is what I'm asking.
I don't know, man. That'd be a pretty crazy native application that Twitter would add. This is one of those payments use cases that we keep seeing coming back, right? We're trying to make payments on Bitcoin work. I just don't know if there's a ton of interest in doing that, right? I think sort of the asset narrative as opposed to the means of exchange narrative has really sort of sealed the deal on the Bitcoin investors. So, even if this was native to Twitter, which a lot of people who hold crypto assets use dearly and every day, I'd be curious to see if this was ultimately used that much. But it could be certainly a cool feature. Brady, as you mentioned, Twitter is kind of interestingly investing in what you could think of as a publishing stack from Twitter Spaces. They bought Review. If this were to be sort of the financialization of those things, I think it could be really interesting. And of course, they have the network effect, which is a big thing in crypto, right? Where the people you want to be where the people are. So if you can bring it to where the people are, hey, maybe it'll work. But it's still TBD in terms of when we would see this happen.
And it's important context here. Jen mentioned Web3. Twitter, we don't hear a ton about it, but they do have in the background this Blue Sky program, this plan to completely decentralize the whole application. And so Jack could be saying it's a matter of time. You can use Lightning easily on the platform once we've decentralized it using Blue Sky, if you really believe that that's going to happen. I don't know.
Yeah, the Blue Sky thing, it remains interesting, right? It's like you can have your there's all these sort of different versions of Twitter that you could have for yourself, right? And so if this became an aspect of some version of Twitter that was very reliant on payments, peer-to-peer payments, then yeah, you would certainly want this on the Lightning Network. I think the Lightning Network, you bring up Web3, Brady, and I'll toss this back to you, but the Lightning Network really remains fairly small sort of in the Web3 picture, right? It's not as widely used as some of these DeFi protocols that function differently, but in some respects are similar. So yeah, I'll toss that back to you for your take as we sort of scan the DeFi Pulse rankings here.
Yeah, it's number 41 on DeFi Pulse. There's $58 million in the Lightning Network. There's way more Bitcoin on Ethereum than there is on the Bitcoin Lightning Network. Now, some decent news this week. El Salvador has just made Bitcoin legal tender. They plan to use Jack Mallers' technology to run that over the Lightning Network. Maybe a lot more payments start getting made, at least in one part of the world, and that makes Bitcoin a bit more of a payments use case as well. Who knows? It's very speculative, but at the very least, you could imagine that might make the Lightning Network become, a little bit more active and a little bit more popular, at least in one part of the world. I mean, Jen, I don't know. Do you think? Sorry, go ahead. David, you were hopping in.
Brady. I'm not intimately familiar with the sort of technical stack. What about sort of throughput? How much volume can Lightning handle if, for example, Twitter was going to adopt it?
I don't think we really have a great picture on that because people just aren't using it very much. I know it's been pretty buggy so far. I haven't done a ton of reporting on this. My guess, though, is if Twitter were going to kick it in, they would just set up a bunch of nodes around the world, maybe in collaboration with some other company that has like $50 million worth of Bitcoin, Jack's other company. So my guess is they would sort of work on making that happen. Yeah, you can see on the screen here, we've got some data up about what's going on with the Lightning Network. As you can see at the top of the screen, the number of nodes have been steadily increasing. Each node has a certain amount of Bitcoin on it that makes it possible to move things around. Obviously, if a lot more people want to use this, you can make a little money running a node. People will be motivated to add more nodes if it actually becomes a going concern. And it going on Twitter could make it a going concern. Tips in Bitcoin could help make it a going concern. Combine that with El Salvador, maybe Lightning really starts to become real.
Brady, we're talking about platforms like Twitter making things easier for the mainstream audience to participate in DeFi and some of these Web3 applications that we're talking about. Do you think it's important for creators who maybe don't understand the space to understand the Lightning Network and how it works, or do we just need to wait for companies like Twitter to launch features, I guess, that are just easy to use and participate in them, and we don't really need to know what's going on in the background?
I mean, I think folks who show any sign of any sort of crypto audience being interested in them should try to open up to it as quickly as possible, just because sometimes, people are enthusiastic about supporting people in that way. There was the funny story on YouTube last year about a woman, a big YouTuber, who had been given 1 Bitcoin years ago and kind of forgot about it, but it was still in her Coinbase account. And she found it last year and was like, holy cow, it's worth $40,000. I mean, that's a small amount of money for her, but I think she ended up giving it away. But still, that's a sign that it doesn't hurt to be open to those kinds of payments.